Okay, so now that we have seen a sample demo of SSIS, the next logical question would be how we can handle errors in SSIS. So in this video, we will see three ways by which you can handle errors in SSIS. So what we'll do is we'll use the same sample demo which we had previously demonstrated, and in this demo we'll inject an error and we'll see that how we can handle the same. So here's a sample demo which we had demonstrated in our previous example. So this demo, what it was doing is basically it was reading the data from the small text file and it was loading in the capital text file, and then later it was taking the data and loading into the table, that is cap name table. Okay, so if you run this, it was at the end of the day it was loading the data into the cap name table. Now what we'll do is we'll inject a small error in this program. So let me go and delete all the records over here, and let me change this data type of the cap name table to the cap name data type to integer. So basically this should throw up an error over here. So let me just make it int. Right, let me save this. So now what will happen is, if you look at the data at this moment, what we have in the small txt file is all alphanumeric. So definitely this will throw up an error, when the data is getting pushed to SQL Server over here. So when this data conversion is happening, it should throw up an error because your data type at this moment is int. So how do we handle this? Okay. And remember that if you build this project right, the SSIS has no way to know that you have changed the data type in this table over here. So he has no idea about this. So at this moment, if I run this, it should throw up an error. So how do we handle it? Now there are three basic ways of handling SSIS errors. So let's start with the first way. Now by any way you handle the errors, right, the first thing what you need to specify is that how do you want to handle the errors and at which position you want to handle the errors. So at this moment, we all expect that the error should come up when the data is starting getting pushed into SQL Server. So that means at this position. So if you remember, we had two control flows. The first control flow reads from the small text file and writes to the capital text file. So this data type change will have no effect, or there will be no errors in the first task. Okay, but in the second task, especially at the last point where there is a the OLEDB insertion is happening, right, where we are actually inserting it to the table on this table, right, at that moment the error will happen. So what we have to do is first we have to say that, okay, in case the error happens on the insertion of SQL Server or on this data flow task, how should we handle it? So edit it, and there is an error output menu over here, okay, or the error output link over here. So just click on this and say that, okay, do not ignore the failure, but basically, if there are any kind of errors, just fail the component and don't go ahead. So you can see that there are three ways by which you can handle errors. Okay, the first one is ignore failure. So in other words, if there are any kind of failure, just ignore it and start moving ahead. The other one is basically fail component. The fail component means that in case there are errors, right, just stop over there, do not move ahead. Okay, and the last one is redirect row. So over here what happens is basically the component doesn't fail. In other words, it moves ahead, but whatever data is which has not been able to insert or which has not been able to process, right, that data is redirected to the error section. So what we'll do is let's select the first one is pretty easy, so there is nothing to talk about. Let's take the third one first, okay, the fail component, and let's say apply. Right. So now what we have said over here is that basically any kind of errors that happen while inserting into SQL Server, right, just fail the component. Now in order to handle this error, right, there is something called as event handlers over here. So let's click on that, and on the event handlers, right, there is an on error event. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll say, okay, if there is any kind of errors in this data flow task, right, basically go and insert into SQL Server. Okay, insert into a table which is an error table over here. So you can see that there is an error table over here, my error, and just put some message over here saying that error has occurred. So when any kind of error events happen in the data flow task, it's redirected to the event handlers, and in the event handlers you can basically catch the error generically in the on error events. Okay, so let's basically push some data in case there are errors into this error table. Okay, so Now, in order to basically fire a SQL statement to the error table, what we need to do is we need to basically take up the execute SQL task. So let's take the execute SQL task, right click, edit, and let me take the current connection what I have, and let's write a simple SQL statement. Let me use the build query, that's much easier. So add a table, my error, right, and basically so insert into my error. We'll just put a generic error at this moment, values, there is an error, cannot move ahead, okay, something like this, right, and let's press OK, and let's parse the query. Query has parsed. Now remember that in order to parse the query, you have to say bypass prepare false. Okay, if you say bypass prepare true, then the query is parsed while you execute the SQL statement or while you execute your SSIS task. So at this moment I made it false so that I can parse it during the designing phase itself. Okay, let's say okay. So now what should happen is, if there are any kind of errors over here, right, it should just fire this on error event, and when it fires the on error event, this SQL task will execute and it will just push up a message into the error table which I have here, saying that there are some errors which have occurred. Okay, simple. So let's run this, and definitely it will throw up errors. So you can see that the last section is red, and it has also executed the on error event because that's green. So let's see. So there you can see that it has basically inserted a couple of statements saying that it was not able to move ahead. So that's one way of handling errors in SSIS. Now the big problem with this methodology is that we are not able to get which value or which row there was a problem, where exactly the problem was. It's a very generic error, right? So how can we actually capture specific about the error, and how can we basically, for example, if you have 100 rows which you are processing, right, and let's say at the 90th row there is a problem, so you would like to basically capture the 90th row data, right, into your error table, and then basically see that how you can fix that error. Now in order to demonstrate that basically how to capture errors at a particular row, or basically how to capture the data actually where the error happened, what we'll do is, if you remember, our control flow had two data flows. Okay, the first data flow basically read the small text file and it wrote to upper text file, and the second one loaded the upper text file into the database. Now in the second section, basically when we were loading from the flat file source, that is from our upper text file into the database, we have done a small data conversion over here. So basically we have used the data conversion object. Okay, now this data conversion object, at this moment it uses the length 10. Okay, so you can only convert data which is it has a restriction of 10 length. Okay, now what we'll do is, in our small text file I've injected a record over here which is much greater than the 10 length. Okay, so this data conversion function over here, or the data conversion object, will actually fail on this data. Okay, so what we have done is, the data conversion, the length is 10 at this moment. In our small text file, I have injected a data which is much more than the 10 length. So basically it will fail at this row. The other rows it will pass. Why? Because all of them are basically less than the 10 length. So all the other rows will process successfully. Okay. So how do we do it? So the first thing is, we would like to specify in the data conversion object that any kind of error that happens, right, in this object, please redirect your row to the error section. So you can see that, especially for the truncation also, right, I'm saying redirect the row, right. See, in the previous in the previous section of the video, we have seen the fail component option. So in the fail component option, what happens is the operation stops at that moment itself, and the errors are redirected to the on error event. Okay, and it doesn't move ahead. In the redirect row, what happens is it actually redirects the data, okay, to the error section, and it moves ahead processing the next data. So in other words, it doesn't stop, it's like the on error resume next. Okay, it just moves ahead, but the row which had a problem, right, it redirects the whole data to the error section. So basically we want the name on which the error occurred. So we are expecting that the second last row should basically be sent to the error section. So let's apply this. Okay. Now, once you do that, right, you will see that there is a small yellow icon over here which says that rows sent to the error outputs will be lost. Okay, so in other words, because at this moment he will emit the error, but there is no one here capturing the error. Okay, so what we'll do is, in order to capture the error, we'll just we have created a small truncated.txt file here. So any kind of errors that emit from the data conversion object, we would like to redirect it to the truncated.txt. Okay, so let's go to the toolbox and let's pull up a destination, a flat file destination. And then from the data conversion, you can see that there is a red arrow over here which is like, which says that this is the error object. Okay, this is the error output. So that error output, let's connect to the flat file destination and say apply. Okay, and in the flat file destination, let's go ahead and provide the truncated.txt truncated. So let's provide the truncated.txt path, right? Okay, so that's just saying that there are no rows over here, so that's fine. This is preview, so it's okay. So now what we have done is we have specified that any kind of errors that come from this data conversion, right, those errors should be redirected to the flat text file, the truncated.txt. So what we're expecting now is that all the other data will be passed, but as soon as the data conversion utility comes to this row, right, especially the row which is greater than 10 length, it will actually redirect to the truncated.txt. So let's run this, and you can see that it read seven rows, right, from the flat file source, but it processed only 6 rows and 1 row was sent to the flat file destination. So if you go to the flat file destination now, that is to the truncated.txt, you can see that it says that at this row there was a problem. So in this way we can know that exactly on which row or on which data the problem happened or the error happened. Now there's one more way by which you can handle errors, and that is at the control flow level. So what you can do is basically you can specify a data flow task at a control level, and what you can say is that in case any of the data flow task fails, you can basically go and specify that what should happen during the failure. So you can see that I've defined a data flow task here, okay, which is coming from the final data flow task of our project. Okay, and if I right click on the connector, right, I can see that there are various options here. I can select the failure option if I wish to. So you can see that the connector has become red. So what it says is that any kind of errors that happen in this data flow task will be redirected here. Okay, and then in that data flow task you can write your custom process, like must be, you can go and fire a SQL statement if you wish to, or go and write to a text file or whatever it is. Okay, so that's a simple data flow task which you can handle by your own methodology. So you can handle errors at the control flow by basically providing one more data flow task here and saying that what should happen during the failures. On the data flow task itself, you can basically specify on each of the objects that do you want to basically fail the component and handle the error on the on-error event, or do you want to basically send the data where the failure has happened to the error section and basically capture it, which we have seen in our previous section of the video, in a flat file destination or SQL table. So depending on your needs, probably you can use one of these methodologies to handle errors in SSIS. So I hope that this session was useful. In the coming up sessions, we're going to see more such demonstrations which are practical, to understand how SSIS actually works. So stick up to this SSIS question and answer video series, and I hope that you will enjoy this whole video series. Thanks a lot.